So we are continuing our sermon series called Revealing True Power. We're looking at the Gospel of Mark and seeing what it is telling us. And I think the Gospel of Mark is showing us, it's revealing to us what true power is. Like it's showing us the fecklessness of political power, the corrosive effects of unmitigated religious dogmatism, right? Like the effects on us all as we try to lord it over everyone around us, right? It's throwing that against us. And to catch you up from where we've been, a few weeks ago we talked about the beheading of John the Baptist. That was the story about King Herod, right? King Herod, he liked John the Baptist, if you remember. He didn't want to kill John the Baptist. He liked him, but Herod, he's big king. He's got to show off. He has this big birthday party. And one of the things that you do when you're big and powerful and you have your birthday party, you got to get your underage niece to dance for all you and all your friends, right? Yeah, like that's no good. It's like, oh, that's creepy. Your niece that's also your stepdaughter, like, cool, man. Like that's like, and she does a dance that's so good that everyone's impressed. He's like, I'll give you half my kingdom. And she says, because her mother's talking to her, give me John, the head of John the Baptist. Now, he doesn't want to kill John the Baptist, right? He doesn't want to. And yet, he should have all the power. He's king, right? And yet, his power ends at the sexy dance of an underage girl, right? Like that it seems like he has all the powers, but there's just nothing there, and he does something that he doesn't want to do. And then you have the Pharisees, which are so religiously dogmatic, like this you do this and you will live. Live this way, believe these things, and you will find salvation finally. And yet, we just find out that it just destroys relationships. And we see what Jesus says is that untold religious devotion, all it does is just erode the family of God, erode the people around us, so we are then become terrible friends to folks and all those things over our unkempt religious devotion there. And then we have a problem with being way too into ourselves, right? Like the disciples, that they were all like, yeah, here it is. And then we saw last week, like Jesus has given us the command to do everything, and yet there was a demon that they could not cast out. And Jesus said, this demon can only be cast out with prayer, that is humbleness and trusting, right? Like that's kind of where we are right now. So, and as we talk and move into this idea of greatness, how would you define greatness? How would you define it? Perhaps if you've been watching any of the winter games over the last few weeks, you might define greatness by these guys. I can't remember if they're from Wisconsin or not. Let's see, where's the like that's I can't remember that, but they're the most Wisconsin cheese-eating looking fellas. Like they'll have a Paps with you faster than anybody else, right? Like those guys that won all the stuff for us in the curling golds, right? Like do you find greatness like that, or maybe you define it in this way, like with Fred Rogers, or if you were into basketball and all that, Michael Jordan, right? Especially when he was with the Bulls, like just greatness upon greatness. Like I like Michael Jordan now because he now owns a NASCAR team, and Jesus likes NASCAR, so that's good. That's good. Or if you're into music, right? If you're into music, you could define greatness as the Beatles or maybe Taylor Swift. And I know some of you over there are like, oh, Taylor Swift can't hold a candle to the Beatles. Like, that's cute. You guys can believe whatever you want to do. All I know is that some of you, I don't even know a Taylor Swift song. All I know is that when you go to Publix this afternoon, you're probably going to be singing along with a little Taylor Swift song that you know all the words to, yet you don't know the song, right? Millennials, am I right? Millennial, am I right? That's just how it is, right? That's just how it is. So how do you define greatness? Like, it's interesting that here we are in Mark, and you got to remember what we talked about right before our readings today. Right before it. The last thing, that gospel lesson that I led, the last thing right before that one is Jesus saying, well, this has to be dealt with in prayer. It's the middle of the disciples failing to cast out a demon. They couldn't do it. They couldn't cast out this demon. And Jesus says this can only be done with prayer. And then Jesus talks about his death and resurrection again. It's like the third time he's done that now. And the disciples are like, what's he talking about? We don't know either. Let's just play it cool. And they're like, all right. And so they just walk into it. And then Jesus says this, and I love this story. Remember, this is right after the disciples fail to cast out a demon, okay? Right after a big failure of theirs. They're coming into Capernaum, and when they were in the house, Jesus asked them, it's like, hey fellas, what were you discussing along the way? And all the disciples, they have like high youth group energy, I feel, it's like, they're all like, oh, he knows. Like he knows, and they're like, shh, everyone play cool. We were discussing Isaiah, Jesus, that's what we were doing. And they kept silent, for for on the way, they had argued about which one of them was the greatest. Like they knew that they were being bad. And all this, I have a photograph of the event of them arguing about which one is greatest. Like this photograph right here. Because you can see this guy in the blue, that's probably James. And he's like, you guys remember when we fed the 5,000? He goes, the whole reason why we could feed the 5,000 is because I caught such a big fish, it was this big. Like it's over there. And this guy walking in the back, he's like, I deserve the green tunic of greatness right now because I healed a squirrel of a terrible disease. I deserve it. And this guy up front, he's like, I already have the green tunic of greatness, right? And they're all talking about, oh, I did this. I cast out those demons. I did all these things right after they all had failed, right? We often, in our search for greatness, will become blind to our own failures. As we point out all the failures of everyone around us, as we try to elevate ourselves to the next echelon of greatness, right? Because we see this all the time. We try to do this. I think one of the best places we see this happening, where we try to elevate ourselves, is what I call mommy blogs. All right, do you guys know what these things are? You guys don't know what mommy blogs are? Some of you are showing your age, but I'm not saying anything. You guys know what they are. You know what they are, because it's not just mommy things, but it'll be, these mommy blogs are communities, online communities of people who just need affirmation and to celebrate successes and wins and all that stuff, but then just in the comments underneath them become just vile traps of terribleness, right? Like someone could be like, hey, my kid loves these new juice boxes, right? And she shoots a picture of her kid sitting in the car seat, holding the juice box or something like that. And then all the comments are all about that child looks too young to have it be turned around that fast. And she needs to be rear facing and just mama was a terrible mother. And and it just goes all the way down there. It doesn't just happen with mommy stuff. It happens with all kinds of things too. I remember Port St. Lucie Breaking News, I think is what it was. Is Facebook group that I kind of do that talks about Port St. Lucie things, and someone did a poll. It's like, what do you think is the best pizza in Port St. Lucie, right? And everyone's like, it's meaningless stuff, and everyone looks at it, and I'm pretty sure someone was trolling it there, but they said Little Caesars. I'm pretty sure it was a troll there, but underneath, you could have assumed that person who said Little Caesars had made fun of all those people's mothers, because they were just, how dare you even dress like there's New York pizza everywhere, blah, 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 all this stuff like this. It's this stuff that's meant for help and encouragement, but all these people need to make sure they assert their greatness enough to let the people around them know, hey, you're dumb, I have the right ideas, right? I have that. You just need to recognize how much better things are with my knowledge in the world, right? It's that pushing down. And we do this all over the place, right? You'll be in the workplace and you'll be gossiping with your coworkers. You're like, can you believe Dale watches The Bachelor. Like that's people like that are not to be trusted, you know? Like that's we say things like that, and it's expressly these things that are there to push people away, to push people down, right? To show people how great you are. Gossip does this, these blogs do it, and we have this in all things. I've seen it a lot over the last 2 years, too. Over the last 2 years, we've had to face the pandemic, and there's been this weird tide of like needing to win the pandemic. Whatever that means, whatever it means to win the pandemic, I don't know. But we all have our very strong, entrenched opinions about what it means to win the pandemic, right? Do you wear a mask? Do you not? Who wears it? When do they wear it? When all these things happen? Do you get vaccinated? Do you not? Like all these things, we have these extremely strong opinions about them. And I want, in all your winning of the pandemic that you've been trying to do, I want to ask you a question. Friends that you had 2-3 years ago before the pandemic, are you as close to them after you had all your strong feelings about the pandemic? Yeah? Have you had any relationships that have been fractured? Yeah. Yeah. I have. I have a lot of things. I mean, you guys saw me thanking you for not being jerks to me during the pandemic, and I appreciate that. Because it was a hard time. Because people had the right idea, and they needed to assert that greatness, like, I can't believe you're doing this way, right? I can't believe that you would do that. And that's the problem, is that in our pursuits for greatness, we often push those people down that we deem lower than us. We often push them down. And Jesus kind of talks about this a little bit. As kind of the bottom of our reading, he says, whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, to stumble is what other things, it would be better for him if a great millstone were hung around his neck and he was thrown into the sea. Like Jesus is kind of going like 1920s gangster here a little bit. Like he's understanding that our feelings about greatness for ourselves often comes at the expense. They're like, oh, I don't like that person's opinion over there. I need to do things to make them go swim with the fishes. You know? And Jesus kind of recognizing that feeling in us. That it would, rather than us pushing those people down and pushing them away from us, it would be better if we were thrown into the sea. You see how he's talking about that, you know? He says all these things. And look, the disciples, they were all about greatness. And think about how the story is working here. Think about the disciples here and what is going on in the story. They were just not able to do something pretty big, to not cast out a demon. And yet, here they are talking about, the fish was this big. That's how we were able to feed this 5,000, right? Like they were talking about which one of them was going to be the right hand of Jesus. Like which one of them was going to be lifted high and mighty right after that. And what does that say to me? What do I think that says? I think the disciples would be completely willing to not free a child from an evil demon in order to be great themselves. We see later on in chapter 10 that the disciples, it's not part of our reading today, but it kind of is. Like in chapter 10, the disciples, or all these kids are around Jesus, and the disciples shoo the kids away from Jesus. Like they're like, get out of here, kids. Like leave the master alone type of thing. It seems like the disciples would be willing to shove children away so that they could be great. They are willing to betray Jesus and run and hide to save their own skins in order to be great. And I think that same feeling of depravity, that same impulse lives inside of us and becomes our desire as well. Because I think we end up in our own wantings to be great. We look at someone, it's like, yeah, I disagree with you about Little Caesar's pizza, and I need to let you know what my opinion is, and we cast them down, right? And think about this. Right after Jesus said all this, he sat them down, and he called the 12, and he said to them, I know you guys are arguing about which one is the best. Let's talk about this. If anyone would be first, he must be last of all and servant of all. And he took a child, and he put him in the midst of them, and taking him in his arms, he said to him, whoever receives one such child in my name receives me. Whoever receives me receives not me, but the one who sent me. Like, Jesus calls us out of our greatness, right? He's to be servant of all and be like a little child. It's like, oh, that's wonderful. You're looking at that like, I can be like a little child. I can, whenever I don't get my juice box right when I need it, I can throw a tantrum, right? Like, I can be a child. Like I can watch unending hours of Bluey whenever I want to. There's one person laughing at that joke. That went over all your heads. All right? Like that's I'm not casting any stones there, but But I can watch, I can be a child, because that's how we often think about it, right? Like, oh yeah, like just need to receive a child. Oh, we love children over here. Like it's almost, children have become like the mega church growth like model, right? Have the kids stuff and the parents will come, and we try to get them involved and have all these things, and we're like, oh, we need to have a childlike faith, we need to have this holy and innocent faith and all. And is that what Jesus is saying here? Now, some of you have heard me talk about this before. Some of you have not. But when Jesus says, he grabs a kid and he says, you have to receive one child in my name, what's he saying? What's he saying about our faith and who we support here? Because the problem is that we often put our current views of children on top of this verse. And our current views of children are just that, they're current. They're not what's old. Because our feelings about children have changed miraculously in the last 100 to 70 years. And many of you in the room knew what it was like before. And I can prove it to you. Let's finish this statement. Children are to be seen and see? Children are to be seen and not heard, right? We, even in our living cultural memory, know that phrase. We know that phrase. That's not how we live with children today. That's not how we consider children today. Some of you are like, that's how we need to be. That's not how we consider them today. That's what it is. So the main commentary I've been using for this study is one of my seminary professors. His name is James Veltz. And this is what he wrote about children back then, right? He says, women who were bringing their infants to Jesus, most certainly asking him to touch them because they were sick and dying. Children were the weakest, most vulnerable members of society. Infant mortality rates sometimes reached as high as 30%. Another 30% of live births were dead at the age of 6, and 60% were gone by the age of 16. Children were always the first to suffer from famine, war, disease, dislocation, and in some areas and eras, few would have lived to adulthood with both parents alive. Children, and this is the point right here, because of all of that, children had little status within the community or the family. While a minor, a child was more on par with what someone would consider a slave. Children are the lowest in society in Jesus' day. They are viewed as leeches who took everything from you. So when you think about the disciples shooing children away from Jesus. It's like, you guys may die soon. Leave it to the adults who are already here. It makes sense then when you look at it like that, doesn't it? It's heartless, and Jesus condemns them for it. But we're also heartless to a lot of those of the lowest parts in our society too. We're also, in our search for greatness, will often leave people behind and lower because we say, you're just leeches on society. You just stay over there, stay out of our fenced-in neighborhoods, stay out of those things, stay out of all that. I need to make sure I have my greatest front yard ever. Right? So you just stay over there. No, don't get too close to Jesus. Stay away. Right? I think that if Jesus was around today and this was saying it, I don't think he would use children, because children doesn't say the idea anymore. I think he would be talking about homeless, those that are drunk, and I think he'd be grabbing someone who was hurt and smelled and said, whenever you welcome one like this, you welcome me. Right? And then think about this. Think about what he says after that. Whoever causes one of these little ones, one of those that we've thrown away, to stumble, it'd be better for you to throw a millstone around your neck. There's no good news here, right? And then think about it in that same thing. He says, and if your hand causes you to do that, cut it off. It'd be better. If your foot causes you to do that to someone, cut it off. It'd be better. If your eyes, gouge them out. It'd be better, right? Like you read this and you're just like, oh my goodness, like this. It becomes not this little cute story about kids, but it's like our insatiable search for greatness and how we treat people around us. And I'm the chief part of that. And we see it all in the world. And we look at Russia and what it's doing to the Ukraine right now needlessly, right? Like it's coming over them. But the beautiful part of the story is that in just a few short weeks in our study here, just a few short chapters, Jesus is going to be going into Jerusalem. And what I want you guys to notice as you're reading the Gospel of Mark 3 times before Easter, hopefully, as you're reading the Gospel of Mark, at the beginning of Mark, we have this kind of cosmic Christ idea where Christ he's a human and he's kind of otherworldly. But as he comes into Jerusalem, as he comes closer to the cross, as he comes closer to there, we see a picture of Jesus grow stronger and stronger and stronger, and that is the humanity of Jesus. As he becomes more humanity, as he takes on the depravity of humanity and our desires for greatness, as he comes in there and he says, no more. Because if there was anyone who could be truly great, it would be Jesus. If there was anyone that could win the pandemic, it would be Jesus, right? If there's anyone that could be great, it would be Jesus. And yet, when it came time at the end, in his full sense of humanity, there going on to the cross, he didn't bend into his greatness. He bent into being a servant. He bent into his childlikeness. He bent into being like a homeless man. He bent into the lowest part of ourselves and died the death that is all described right here, where it's almost like he had a millstone around his neck and was thrown into the sea. So it's like he was dismembered with his eyes and feet and hands, that he died all of that so that he could meet us all in the basement of our own humanity, so that 3 days after he may rise up. And when he rises up in newness of life, he shakes off all that old death that is on us all and brings us up with him in a newness of life. the good news about this story is that that's a standard that we'll never meet. We're always going to be sinful and search after the greatness. But the beautiful part of the gospel of Jesus Christ is that the Lord meets us in the depths of our own humanity and pulls us up and shows us the humanity we were created for and brings us life and forgiveness in that. And I think that's good news for us all. So, for all of us that are constantly striving for greatness, don't worry about it. You can go, I can just be a servant. But in those moments when we let that old Adam pop up, know that Jesus has already lifted you out of the mess and that you're okay because he has declared you his child. And I'm done right there. Let's say a prayer. Jesus, we thank you that you love us. Lord, continue to give us a humble spirit. Lord, give us a spirit that doesn't just seek after the greatnesses of the world around us, but sees the lowly all around. And Lord, give us compassionate hearts for them. And Lord, make us your hands and feet as we go out into the world, loving everybody. Thank you, Jesus. Amen.